Hey everybody, I'm Landon Brooks with Heartlands Conservancy. I'm the Communications and Engagement Manager for the organization, and today I am going to be joining you with Mitch Leachman from the St. Louis Audubon Society to talk about backyard birding. So, as you know, we've had our backyard birding blitz going on since April 1st. It was going to be from April 1st to April 30th, but with the extended stay-at-home order, we thought, why not just give everybody an extra month to kind of introduce them more to birding. So how that project kind of came about is that, the shutdown order happened in mid-March, and there wasn't a lot of plants or really a lot of animals or insects out, but there were a ton of birds. So we thought we would just take the time to focus on birding, and it worked out really good. So far, we've had 525 observations with 85 species identified and 79 observers. So I'm going to put a little scrolly thing at the bottom of the screen here with the link to our iNaturalist project. Actually, and all the information that came from our iNaturalist project fed into the City Nature Challenge, the St. Louis City Nature Challenge. So that was pretty cool. And I don't know if you guys saw yesterday, but we did put out our backyard birding bingo card for those of you who don't have the iNaturalist app, or we just decided to do it that way too. We actually used the pictures from observations in our area to make that bingo card. So that was a very nice aspect as well. I really want to thank Carrie Bretthauer and Amy Hewler. They actually supplied all the pictures. They did a really, really good job on their observations. So thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Amy. I really appreciate it. So now I am not a huge birder myself. I have learned a lot through this process, but I did kind of want to give people a better idea of what birding is, and there was really no other organization to do it with than the St. Louis Audubon Society. So today I'm bringing in Mitch. Hey, Mitch.
Landon.
He's going to talk to us a little bit more about birding in general, and he has his own observation about our backyard bingo card. One of the prizes was for rarest observation. So he's going to tell us who the winner of that is. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Mitch.
Thanks, Landon. And thanks to Heartlands Conservancy, certainly, for reaching out to us. Look forward to this conversation. Look forward to additional opportunities in the future. Landon and I, we've already discussed a little bit about possibly continuing this into the summer. After all, this was intended to be outdoors. Some of you may have been a little bit disappointed as we had full interest in getting this going this morning at 9 outside with the birds singing along, and perhaps even pointing out some as we had them. And unfortunately, technical and meteorological issues won out. So we felt it best, since we're here in the middle of the monsoon season, to go ahead and just do this and do it in a more fixed space. So appreciate, Landon, again, your flexibility with that. So I'm the Director of Programs for St. Louis Audubon. I'm a birder by definition, just because I'm active in part of the St. Louis Audubon organization and have been for nearly 20 years now. But I'm also very interested and very fascinated by basically everything in our natural world. Birds just happen to be one of the easiest ways to connect to the natural world, right? So you can be fascinated by all sorts of critters, and I hope you are. But it turns out birds are so accessible, right? They're like in every place that you could imagine, including some of the most developed or even harsh spaces. Certainly around a space like the St. Louis metropolitan area, you can find them in all sorts of cool places. They come in all sorts of different varieties, right? Different types and species of birds. Here in this part of the country, we have about 400 different species of birds. So that'll keep you busy for a long time. They're colorful. right? Birds are not only colorful, but they even change their colors, right? A number of them will molt their feathers. We were talking, Landon and I, earlier about the American goldfinch. And yes, we have American goldfinches year round, but they look different in the winter than they do in the summer, or at least the guys do, the males do, because they put on breeding colors, that yellow canary, as some people call them, a bright yellow and black. That's the male in breeding plumage. So twice a year, he's molting his feathers and changing his overall look. So that's really, really cool. And they sing, right? So, it's just worth reminding ourselves of why birds are so attractive to us. We're so drawn to them, and they sing. I mean, lots of critters out there vocalize, including many insects vocalize, right? But, we look at our bird diversity around the globe, and we, I think, appropriately consider them as songsters and singing and having songs that they sing to each other, right? Because it's not for us; they're singing it for breeding reasons. But anyway, so all sorts of really cool reasons to be excited about birds. So before we get too much further in, birding and looking for birds and caring about birds. So what do you need, right? What's the essential tools for being a birder, for bird watching, for caring about birds? And I want to repeat that last of the three lists there, because we do want to take some time here with you at the second half, sort of the latter third of the discussion, and talk about things that you can do to help birds, right? Tools to see them is great. Tools to see them is wonderful. Helping you engage with them is very important, but actually making sure you're aware of simple and quick and easy ways to help them is really important. So maybe not surprising that I would hold up binoculars, right? So they come in all sorts of styles, certainly all sorts of price ranges. This particular pair was bought probably a dozen years ago, I think, at least. They suit me very well today, nearly indestructible. They've been exposed to all sorts of elements. Paid maybe $250, I think, at a local bird store, which I frequent, and I'm a huge fan of our local bird stores. There's many around St. Louis area, and that is one of my first primary tips when it comes to optics, when it comes to binoculars. When you say, yeah, I like looking at them, and you don't need binoculars to bird watch, but certainly to see more birds, to see them further away, to see them better, right? To actually see the detail on them. Binoculars are really, really important. But go to one of those local bird specialty stores. Find a Wild Birds Unlimited in your area. There are many. They're all franchise operated at wonderful local small business owners. And most of them will have at least a few pairs of binoculars. They're not going to have a huge array that you could get, through the web. But they're going to have really smart bird people and folks that know binoculars and know optics, and they will be able to answer any questions you may have, show you how to buy binoculars, how to look at them, how to use them, and so on. And I will also mention one other thing, maybe two other things. I mentioned price. You can spend thousands of dollars on binoculars. I'm not going to say that's a bad investment. And there's reasons that people spend that kind of money. But did I mention this pair was a little over $200? You do not need to spend that kind of money. And there's a really good a brand out there right now whose name I knew was going to escape me, and I apologize for that. It might come to me later. But they have a really good pair online, and you can order, and I think they're $100. The St. Louis County Library System is using that particular setup of binoculars. So the last thing I would say is magnification and field of view. These are 10 by 42. They're arguably the most common type of binoculars. would be 8 by 40 or 8 by 42. So it's a slightly lower magnification, but essentially the same field of view that you're looking at the birds, but that's the range that you're going to be looking at. So binoculars. Where to get your knowledge, right? Where to go for expertise, where to look and to see what you're seeing, right? Figure out what you're looking at. So I'm a little bit on the older end of the crowd. I learned my birds with books. Smartphones and apps and things, right? That's more recent, and I'll touch on that as well. But I'm holding up to, there are lots of field guides out there. Even if you're oh so comfortable with apps and your pocket computer, a good field guide is still going to serve you very, very well and for a very, very long time. These happen to be two titles that are very good and good for our region, and you can't go wrong. There are many more out there, but I'll just again hold them there, Peterson and Kaufman. So speaking of apps, you know what this is, right? You know, your own Android or your iPhone or what have you. So there are many apps out there. The two that I would draw your attention to primarily, Landon already mentioned iNaturalist, and that is a very good app, although it's not very adept at helping you identify birds. If you know what you're looking at, it's a very good tool to use to report your observation, right? To put that data into the cloud so scientists can use it. eBird, E-B-I-R-D, eBird is another very cool a website, program, and app that I would encourage you to consider using. And again, that is also about reporting your observations for science. But the two really good apps for bird identification, essentially a mobile field guide, would be Merlin through the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and then the National Audubon Bird Guide. So those two are very, very good. And my last comment I would make about field guides, apps, and things in bird identification is try not to walk around looking for birds, playing bird calls, right? So many of these tools that we just talked about, the apps, the electronic tools, can play bird song. And that's intended for you to go, oh, okay, I heard X. Then you play the call of the song from your app and go, yes, that is what I heard. If you walk around and you're playing the song incessantly, you could literally disturb the birds. You could literally get them agitated. They could think there's a competitor nearby. They might come looking. They might leave their nest. They might leave it unguarded. So there's a whole lot of things. The bird's expending energy. It's getting stressed. So it's a whole lot of reasons to be very, very cautious about playing bird song when you're outdoors, when you're looking for birds. If you have to play it, ideally you play it on a very low volume, just so you can hear and then see if that's what you were just listening to. So hopefully that helps. Speaking of bird songs, I'll just do a couple. I just think this is kind of funny. Again, if we were outside, right, we'd be hearing birds, but we're not. So we'll try this. If we can get it to play. And then there's silence. And so that's not working out. Okay, never mind. So much for bird song. You'll just continue to hear me talk. So where to go birding? So this morning's plan was in a backyard. This afternoon's plan, if I had a different setup or if it hadn't started raining again, we'd be perhaps looking at birds in my backyard. So this is suburban St. Louis County, your county, your city, right, your neighborhood, wherever you are is a fine place to go birding. And certainly if you have restrictions in place from your local government, you obviously want to be respectful of those. As many of you know, in Missouri counties, we've been allowed to visit parks, to maintain physical distance, but to be outdoors and to be wandering around. I know a number of the Illinois state parks were opened up a few weeks back. I think some may still be closed, but there's basically anywhere you want to go, you can go birding. I know people that are passionate Cardinals baseball fans, and for years they would talk about, and they would even take pictures of the birds they would see during Cardinals games. True story. There are a number of different pretty cool birds that will visit the stadium. So if you want to get sort of an official list, you can go to stlouisaudubon.org. Under our birding tab, we have a list of hotspots. We have a list of very reliable parks, natural areas, conservation areas, both Missouri and Illinois counties on our website. And there's several dozen there, so that will keep you busy for a long time, and you can always go back to them. I want to shift now in the minutes we have left, and certainly we'll take questions if you have any as we move along. But I wanted to talk about what you can do for birds, right? Seeing them, looking for them, knowing how to identify them, reporting your observations, right? All of that is very important, and it helps you enjoy them, helps you experience them, helps you connect with them. But how much better the birds, and you will be if we're also actively working to do things for them, right? To help them. So we're talking about things like water, right? So in the smallest of space, right? You don't need a 5-acre estate. All you need is a patio, right? Maybe it's a rental, you're in a condo. All you need is a tiny space, and you can put out water for birds. You can put out a bird bath, if you will. All of our birds drink water, and all of our birds need to clean their feathers, and that's bird bathing, right? Bird bath. That's why they're splashing the water out. They're trying to get the water in and around their feathers, and then frequently you can see them perched nearby, and they'll be preening for a while, and they're resetting their feathers, and they're cleaning their feathers. They're getting oil from a gland they have, and it's very, very important for them for not only thermal regulation. Feathers are a very important part of bird physiology, not just for flight, but dirty feathers are a real issue for birds. So bird bath, a shallow container of water, very helpful, very easy thing to do, and then a very selfish, reliable place for you to see birds, right? So water. Shelter is also very easy to do. Bird houses is what I am referring to when I say shelter. So we have a couple dozen different bird species in our area that nest in cavities in the wild. So hollow trees that have been excavated by a woodpecker, right? So the tree was dead or decaying, a branch was dead or decaying, and a woodpecker came along and excavated a cavity, or a natural cavity had formed by decay over time. So a couple dozen different bird species that look for natural cavities, but in an average suburban setting, dead or dying trees are not left standing, right? We don't want a tree falling on our car or house or what have you. So nest boxes, bird houses end up being a very easy and quite reliable place and opportunity for you to help birds, putting out a little nest box for wrens. All right, several different tiny little songbirds will nest in a wren box. If you love owls, who doesn't love owls? There are screech owl boxes. So they're significantly bigger. You mount them on a tree. And our smallest nesting local owl, called the eastern screech owl, may show up and utilize your abode. If you live in sort of the exurbs, if you're not close into town, if you've got some open space around you, you might be lucky enough to get bluebirds, and there's a different box for eastern bluebirds. So shelter with birdhouses is a very cool thing you can do. But more importantly, you can do shelter and you can do food by planting native plants in your landscape. So I'm not actually going to talk about bird feeders, which is traditionally what we would think about when it comes to feeding birds. And that's not because feeding birds with bird seed is bad or in some way I'm criticizing it. I'm actually looking at my bird feeders out through our patio door right now, and I do suet as well because I love woodpeckers. But the single best way to feed birds is to provide them what they would use, what they would eat, what they would need to sustain themselves and to reproduce in the wild. And you do that by restoring habitat from the ground up, by replacing the turf grass, or at least part of it, by replacing the boxwoods, or at least some of them in your landscape. You replace them with native plants because those native plants help recreate the ecosystem, the natural process, the natural system out there that includes insects, that includes spiders, yes, spiders, that includes all sorts of critters, amphibians and reptiles, all sorts of critters that form this intricate food web which birds need to survive. The bird seed in that feeder is fine for many adult birds, but very, very few, American goldfinch being one of them, very few birds actually would feed seed to their babies. Like something like 98% of all of the land birds in North America feed their young insects. Those insects need native plants to survive. So if you really, really, really want to support birds, if you want to see more of them, if you want to do good for them, then you look for opportunities in your landscape, at your church, at your school, in your community. You look for places to introduce native plants, native shrubs, native trees, native perennial flowers. And speaking of critters, in my own interest, right, bigger than just birds, speaking of critters, you do those native plantings and you get bees and butterflies and dragonflies and all sorts of other wonderful things in your landscape that you get to enjoy, right? In between the birds, right? Here's a bird, then there's a bee. Here's another bird, then there's a butterfly. There's a tree frog, but then there's a bird. So seeing the full web of life simply by gardening, simply by bringing in native plants. So I'm going to wrap up my comments, and then again, perhaps you'll have some questions. I'm going to wrap up my comments by talking about some resources. So one, speaking of native plants, so let me do this first. So lots of cool tools online for information about native plants and birds. And one specifically I will shout out. Through National Audubon, they created something called Plants for Birds. So no matter where you live, no matter where, we're going to talk about some very specific local resources here in the St. Louis area, but no matter where you live, no matter how you got this video, no matter where you came across it, look up Audubon, search Plants for Birds, and it's a very cool online tool where you can type in your zip code and you can click a whole bunch of other search functions, and you can get an assortment of plant recommendations for birds for your space. So again, that gray hair, that older personality of me, I love books, and so I'm going to show you two more books. So everything you ever wanted to know about this notion of restoring habitat, recreating nature in your own landscape, the reasons why, the steps you can take to do it, native plants and other stuff. This is a 2020 book. This was published earlier this year. We know the author. He's been to St. Louis repeatedly. This is his third book, but this is one of the best. And find this book, Nature's Best Hope. You will be thoroughly inspired, and you will get a whole bunch of cool tips and ideas to implement on your own. My second book that will hold up, a little harder to find, but a very easy author to find by the name of Tilka. I'll hold this up here. Like that, Tylka. It's actually born and raised in Belleville, I think. But he worked for the Missouri Department of Conservation for a number of years, and he wrote this book while he worked for them. But don't be dissuaded, should you live in Illinois, when I say Missouri Department of Conservation, because this book is good for the lower Midwest, for our entire multi-state region. And this is all about native plants for wildlife. So check into that. You might find it at the library. You certainly can find used copies online. And I will and with a few shout outs. So events and tools. One, Landon was talking about the Backyard Birding Blitz and this sort of through May kind of thing. So don't forget, and you've got your birding bingo online as well that they posted. So we, St. Louis Audubon, we have a birdathon. We have a St. Louis birdathon's been going on all month of May. So it runs through Sunday. That is on our website, again, stlouisaudubon.org. Check it out. You might be intrigued and want to participate in the birdathon. Again, the birding blitz we mentioned, and 2 programs. So I said locally, we have personal support and assistance. So Heartlands has last year brought into the St. Louis area for you all conservation at home. So you may have seen it, you may have read about it. You can find more details on Heartland's website. St. Louis Audubon, my organization, started in 2012 something we call Bring Conservation Home. So for 8 years, and then here's our yard sign, pretty cool logo with the state bird of Illinois, right? Cardinal. Both of those programs, Conservation at Home and Bring Conservation Home, 2 different programs, but doing very, very similar things in providing personal advice and recommendations to individual landowners around the St. Louis area. So if you really want to get into this, doing good things for birds, what native plants to put in, where to put them, what could your landscape support, you are interested in more than just birds, all of that stuff fits within one or both of those programs, quite frankly. So that's sort of my story. I, again, wish that we could have been doing this with birdsong today. Even my little tool, I have to do this, right? So this is the tool I was trying to use. So I was joking with Landon, right? So this is like 15-year-old technology. So this predates our smartphones, but I think the battery died. Landon, if you want to come back on and, maybe we got some questions, which would be cool, and we can have a conversation. Oh my gosh, it's not Landon.
I'm not Landon. Landon's internet died. He is trying to get back on right now. Oh. So I'm Mary from Heartlands, covering for Landon right now.
Hello, Mary.
Well, thank you for doing this. This has been a really good session on bird resources, especially. One question I had that I put into the Facebook questions is, you were talking about screech owl boxes, which I have not seen before. Are those something that can be put in an urban and suburban area, or will they only work in? Okay.
Absolutely. My first exposure, personally, just sort of hearing about and seeing one, was 15, 16 some odd years ago, and early in my St. Louis Audubon career. One of our board members had put one up at their University City House, suburban St. Louis County, and on a tree in their front yard in their cul-de-sac. In the first season, the first breeding season that he put it up, they had nesting screech owls in it. And that's just one of many, many success stories that we've heard about over the years. The screech owls are not half as well known as the great horned or even the barred owl. The great horned owl sort of sucks all the oxygen out, right? All owls get focused on a great horn for good reason. It's a wonderful bird. But the screech owl is, pint size, not the most melodious of calls, but they are sort of everywhere as well. So yeah, absolutely.
I'm trying to see if there's other questions, but one that I know that some people have asked us when we're out talking is, do you recommend keeping bird feeders up all year and full, or only during the winter? Or do you have any thoughts on feeders?
Yeah, common question. And like I said, bird feeding, just to again reinforce the point about native plants, right? Bird feeding is a supplemental activity. Bird feeding is sort of a human-centered thing, of a way of reliably bringing them in to a space where we can see. And as far as seasonality, we could talk at length about, availability of food and, cold snaps and so on. But more than anything, it's really up to the homeowner and how much you want to spend on seed and how frequently you want to put it out. Because again, ideally, you're in a space where there's both natural food sources, whether or not you're doing native plants, but there's natural food sources and your feeders. So the birds are taking advantage of that supplemental food when it's there, and then when the feeder's empty, then they sort of go back to regular behavior.
Yeah, I'm hoping they're going to eat all my mosquitoes and stuff while around my yard, right?
Yeah, good luck with that, since we have very few birds that actually eat mosquitoes. But that's a job for bats, which is a whole nother part of the natural system, right? Which I'm also fascinated with, and we could all do to have some more bats in our systems in our neighborhood. So.
Okay, well, I'm not seeing any other questions at this point, but if people continue to ask questions, we will send them your way, and you can answer them afterwards, and we can put them in the Facebook comments as we get answers back from you. How's that sound?
That sounds great. Sounds perfect. And, well, as I think both Landon and I mentioned, I mean, we certainly look forward to continuing this conversation and actually getting outdoors, maybe one day in June, and do some actual birding.
Yes.
Facebook Live. So
I think that would be very helpful for everyone who's been participating in the backyard birding blitz. I know I myself am not great at bird ID, especially when it's listening for them. If I see them, sometimes I know what they are, but hearing them, I don't always know what they are. So I think that would be really helpful. So, well, thanks for all you do at the St. Louis Audubon Society. So if people are interested in becoming a member or donor of the Audubon Society, where do we send them?
Yep. stlouisaudubon.org. We got a brand new website revealed just a couple months ago, and lots of good information there, as well as membership opportunities as well. Thanks for that mention, Mary.
Of course, always. Well, thank you. You're wonderful partners across the river. We appreciate you and all you do. So have a great rainy day, and hopefully we'll be able to get outside with you soon and do the actual birding.
Very good. Look forward to it.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks again.
Bye, everybody.